Okay, let's look at these evolutionary trees. And before we start, I want you to know that these can also be called cladograms. I go back and forth. I learned them as cladograms, but I like evolutionary tree better. A cladogram it's this tree that shows us evolutionary relationships. And so it's actually showing different species. And let's just unpack this thing. These boxes are living, and I'm going to say species. So we have species A, species B, and species C. And this tree is going to show us the relationship between them. Our living species are found at the ends of the tree, and I'm going to tell you something now that's going to hurt your brain. Trees can be in any orientation. So I could show you this exact same tree upside down, and it's the same tree. I could flip it, it's the same tree. I could turn it on its side, it's the same tree. I could change the angles of the lines, and it's the same tree. So the only thing that's going to make it into a different tree is if I straight up move the lines and I change how the lines are connected to each other. That would make it into a different tree. But if I take that picture right there and I flip it around, do whatever weirdness, same tree. Never forget that. On our tree, we have ancestors. And the ancestors are indicated by nodes. In that last tree, remember this one? We had each of these nodes represented a speciation event. And that's kind of what happens. Like, look at this. We have an ancestor that gives rise to living species A, and it also gives rise to ancestor number 2, right? Do you see that? Like, ancestor number 1 isn't alive anymore. Maybe we should notice this. Time is illustrated on a tree where the tips of the tree are the earliest, like, or the most now. And the base of the tree is the farthest back in time. So you can look at this and you can say, oh, okay, this ancestor number 1 is actually older than ancestor number 2. Oh my gosh, trees show you so much information. It can help you come up with some hypotheses for what kinds of fossils you might find out in the world. Ancestor 2 gave rise to living critter B and living critter C. Okay, I can do this. I'm struggling to find the color that I want here. The numbered slashes are traits. So take a look at this. Trait number 1 is something possessed by ancestor 1, which means unless you make other notes, you can assume that that trait is also possessed by every living species on this tree. Because look, you can draw a line from everybody, right, back to that trait. Every single person comes back to that trait. Every single one comes back through that trait. So they all have that trait. Does critter A have trait 2? No. Look, there's no way, maybe I'll highlight this. There's no way for critter A to get to trait number 2 through time, right? Like they would have to, critter A would have to turn into turn back into the ancestor. Like there's no path that trait number 2 can show up for critter A. But B and C both have trait 2. B has trait 3. And C has trait 4. The cool thing about trees is you're given the tree. You don't have to memorize relationships. You don't have to memorize critters and their traits and their ancestors. You can be given a tree and you can figure it all out. The last thing I want to tell you in this tree is that you can look at the critters and you can determine their most recent common ancestor. I'm going to write that down. Most recent common ancestor. This is a really important concept in determining relatedness. The most recent common ancestor of everyone on this tree is ancestor, that's trait, sorry. Ancestor 1 is the most recent common ancestor for everybody on this tree. Ancestor 2 is the most recent common ancestor for B and C. Ancestor 2 is more recent than ancestor 1. Do you agree with that? And here's the amazing thing. That means that B and C are more closely related to each other than either of them are to A. I know you're going to have to push pause on that and write that down and think about that. And don't worry, we will have tons and tons and tons of practice, because you might think, are A and B equally as closely related as B and C? And you would look at the top of the tree and you'd be like, yeah, dude, they're the same. Except you got to look at the ancestor and you go, B and C share a more recent common ancestor, so they're more closely related to each other. Let's look at another tree as an example. Oh, no, let's not look at one. Let's make one. Let's see if we can imagine this ancestral tetrapod as our most recent common ancestor for these 4 living critters. And they're placed in correct order, because you can imagine the whale and the human share a common ancestor, and the lizard and the bird share a common ancestor, and they share the ancestor with the whatever. They share that ancestral tetrapod ancestor. Would you have known that? Lizards and birds are called non-avian reptiles. Birds are called avian reptiles. And lizards are called non-avian reptiles because they are all reptiles. And these are all mammals. And if I draw you that tree, you now know that. You can look at that tree and you can be like, oh, I see how they are related to each other. Here's an interesting one. Lizards and humans, they're close to each other in the tree. Are they most closely related to each other? Well, let's follow back and find out where they share an ancestor. The ancestral tetrapod is their most recent common ancestor, which means, yeah, no, they're not very closely related to each other compared to their sister groups, like the folks that they're in a group with. Super interesting. And look, here is this tree flipped on its side, and this is me showing you that it doesn't matter how we do it, because we still have, what was it? Were we comparing the human and the bird? I don't know what we were comparing, but the relationship is the same. No matter how you flip it, no matter how you draw it, the relationships in the cladogram are the same. And that's the thing that you're looking for. You're looking for relatedness. All right. There are a couple of kinds of clades that we're going to name, and then we're done. So let's go naming some clades.